The Rebbe is Mamshech in Sifhei. He starts saying like this, that many times it's explained that there's in Yonim in Torah, that even though by Shkofer Shena it seems that different things, one has nothing to do to the other, but if you look a little bit deeper, being that it's Torah Achas, you can find a common denominator in many different things, as it's explained also in many Sfarim from Gedali Yisrael. According to this, Rebbe, you can say that the two hasboras, two explanations in the din which we just explained before in Bar Metzra, are a general gather. There's a general gather which is explained and manifests in every din in a different way according to that din. What is the general gather? If you say something is connected or shocking to something else, shaft it creates a pnimius again, and a real connection between the two things, which means that the second person, the shochin, becomes totally different in his actuality. Al derech, as is explained before in the Din Bar Metzra, that the Bar Metzra receives a kinyan in the field, or that Ashach is not be'efim chitzoni, or it's only a superficial thing, which means it's a chiyuv, a hanhoga on the person. That's the second way in Bar Metzra, that it's only a hanhoga table. That is the general rule, which the Rebbe is going to explain in two other things as well. And the Rebbe says that we're going to divide this, the Rebbe says, the three inyanim of Eilam, Shana, and Nefesh. And in Eilam world, that's already the din of the Bar Metzra, which we explained before, that they have these two Gedorim Klolim, whether the Bar Metzra becomes an actual owner in the field, or it's only a din on the Hanhoge of the Lekeya. This is what we learned until now. Then the Sivav, the Rebbe goes on and explains a thing, Bishana, in time, and the meaning von Zman. The Rebbe starts to explain. By the din von Tesis Michel Alakedesh being Makapurim, was his Levira Hakel Minatera, that everybody holds up in the you have to be Mesav on Yemakurim Michel Alakedesh. And then B'Shabbos of Yontim, there's also din of Tesis Michel Alakedesh, which this is only like the day is was a Tzidas is Minatera or the Rabbanon, there's a Machlekes and the Shenim, whether it's Midraisa or Midrabanon, but Akaponim, there is such a concept of a Hisofas Michel Alakedesh. Was euch da is an Indian von Schenes. This is also the same concept of a shochin, because the hour, the time before Shabbos or after Shabbos that you meisiv Mechil ala Kodesh is a shochin to the Shabbos. The Zman von Lufnei Shabbos or Lachereo is a shochin besamach to Shabbos. Und euch da can man fast sein the zwei Efanim over here also. The Rebbe will explain it in these two Efanim which we explained before. Aleph, one way is that the Shechenis macht a Sheiches Pnimius, it becomes a real connection between the time of before and the time of Shabbos. The Zman was far or noch Shabbos, Mitzazayin Shechenis Shabbos, the time before and after, being that it's so close to Shabbos, Verter Nishtana, that time of, even though it's not Shabbos, it's a time from Friday or Mitzvah Shabbos, it becomes changed and bekommt me'etzem kedushas HaShabbos. He receives the etzem kedusha HaShabbos. The Rebbe in Orah 21 only says that even though it's a shochen to Shabbos, it still has to be that the person should be mekabel upon himself that time, as it's mashma and Shulchan Aruch that Rebbe has been saying in certain places. It doesn't become, because it's a shochan, automatically. The person has to be mekabel himself. And the Rebbe then brings out that there's also the time of Bein Hashmoshes, which is also included in the Tosfos Shabbos. Over there, you don't have to be mekabel. It becomes be'etzem, part of the Shabbos, according to this way, that it becomes mamish from the etzem kedusha Shabbos. The Rebbe also brings out in Orah 22 a very interesting thing. which is brought down in the Kodesichas, where the Rebbe explains this Inyan in the Kodesichas Chelek Tezayin Ba'arichas. Over there, the Rebbe brings the Mechilta. The Mechilta says that the Zocher Milafon of V'Shomim Achrov, it says that Mesifim Mechil Ala Kedesh a mashal for Nazev, which is Toiref Milafon of Achrov. He grabs and he's Toiref and he eats it up. So the Rebbe brings out a very Geshmak Inyan. When the Zev is Toiref and he eats it up, it becomes Dam Basik Psadi. That means it becomes like part of him. It's not a side thing. It becomes part of him. So it's exactly like this derech, the first derech, that it becomes mamish, a part of the Shabbos itself. The only thing is that it says, over there, it's not the time when he's Torah v'heiring, but it becomes dam b'sasei afterwards. But shaking over here, it's mamish in this man of the Heisafa that becomes one thing with Shabbos. So that's one way that it becomes from the etzem kedusha Shabbos. Other days, back to the Pnim, the Zman Atzmai vet nit b'kedusha Shabbos. The additional time of the thesis does not become part of the Shabbos. Yes, aber is b'shchenis and Zman from Shabbos, being he's a neighbor, is the fad ala odom chal chiyav achana to Shabbos, which the Rebbe will point out a little later. That's be'etzem to the be'ike to the mean from Isser Melacha in those moments that he's meisif mechel ala kodesh, but that's already an obligation on the person, not that it becomes part of the etzem kedusha Shabbos. Rebbe goes on, Sib Zayin. Al pezekem men zogen, ados is the bira machlekes aposkim, zi der zman hatoisves ken men mekayim zan mitzvahs kiddush Shabbos v'chulu, if you can do then Shabbos, the kiddush. Today was held in those opinion, would hold that zman hatoisves ken men mekayim zan mitzvahs kiddush v'chila Shabbos, or you can actually make kiddush and eat the Suda Shabbos, which is a mitzvah to do on Shabbos. It does valzei nemen on, at der Zman hatoises ved b'kedusha Shabbos b'yontif. The achila on Shabbos has to be on Shabbos. Kiddush, you have to be mekadosh Shabbos. B'meila, they hold that you can make kiddush and eat the Suda Shabbos beforehand in the Zman hatoises is because they hold that the Zman hatoises becomes part of the etzem kedusha Shabbos. It becomes part of the day, as the Rebbe brings down in the order 25, the Lashon Hataz. It becomes like Laila or Mocher. And then the Rabbi continues on something, a whole alichas legabedini from Shviz. And in brackets, the Rabbi says, Biafo Pikain is oich ledi deis, that it becomes from the etzem kedusha Shabbos, is bechaga Pesach. Tormen nit machen kiddush and mekayim za mitzvahs achilas matzah in the mizman hateisvus l'chayda. Why not? If you say that it becomes mamish like the day of Shabbos and Yontif, the man tastes, it becomes like the actual day. So this man that tastes from Pesach, it becomes like Pesach. Why can't you make kiddush and eat matzah in that hour as well? Now, lucky as you can. So the Rebbe says, die mitzvahs sind verbunden mit den mitzvahs von Laila, the mitzvahs of Achilas Matzah. And therefore, Kiddush, which in the halacha is explained, has to be in the same time. It's huksh to matzah, and therefore it has to be done in a time of matzah. Thus, the mitzvah of matzah, and therefore Kiddush also has to do with the fact that it's b'mitzias begashmi's laila. That was the time when Yetzias Mitzrayim happened. Und die Sheiches, Shebeschenes, kann nicht aufton, as soll werden the mitzias as man von laila. It can give it that it becomes like the Zman, it becomes like Kedusha of the Yom Tov itself, it becomes mamish like Yom Tov itself. But the Metzias is, it's not night. And being that Pesach, you have to do it at a time when it's Metzias Laila, therefore, you cannot be Mekayim the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, and therefore not to make Kiddush in that time. The Rebbe in Torah 26 brings down that the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan and Alter Rebbe in Sibtov Reish Lametes also writes the same thing, Gabi Achila Balayla, the first night of Sukkah, in the Sukkah. And the dinner is because it's Mukash, it's Hekesh between Sukkah and Pesach. So just like by Pesach, we say that you can't do it in the Zman HaTesis because it has to be Balayla Mamish. The same thing is also the dinim Gabi Sukkah, eating in the first night, has the same dinim as well. Back to the Pnim. That is according to the day that becomes Yontiv Mamish. It becomes Mamish like the Etzem Kedushas Yontiv, like the Etzem Yontiv. If you can make Kiddush neat, this it as well on Shabbos and on Yontiv, besides Pesach and Sukkot. Loidi day is aber as Teisves is nor legabi Iser ha'odom b'melacha. That's what you mentioned before, that it's only on the person legabi the Iser melacha. It was the far was l'shitosam hat der Zman ha-Teisves hayoim nor a shayches chetzonis from Zman Shabbos. It's not a pnimis dikkesh. It doesn't become the day of Shabbos or Yontiv. It's only a superficial connection. Chetzonis dikki connection. It is not begeder zu werden a Teil von Zman Shabbos. It doesn't become Mamish al Shabbos. Aber Mele kann man in dem Zman nor meisiv sein auf sich. Therefore, what the person can be meisiv on sich, just like by the Bar Metzra. The Lekeach has an obligation. The person over here has an obligation. As is only shtonki melacha, the Isa Vasis melacha shouldn't do a melacha b'kayete b'zeh. Aber me ken dann nicht mekayim sein the mitzvahs, was sind verbunden mit dem Zman HaShabbos. You cannot make Kiddush and eat the Suda because that is connected, as we said before, with the Zman of the Etzem Mitzias of Shabbos. In order 29, the Rebbe points out that there's another nafkamina, these two ways. If you're going to say the mitzvahs are teisvis, is a mitzvahs part of it, part of the yontiv itself, therefore it becomes a mitzvahs etzem, a mitzvahs asay protius. It's a protius the mitzvahs asay of Shabbos for yontiv. In other words, it becomes the etzem kudus of Shabbos, and therefore as a result, it's Shabbos, and it's a mitzvahs asay shazman groma. Or the other side is, it's only a superficial, then the connection is only a close connection to all Yom Tevim. It doesn't have a particular connection, it doesn't become part of this Yom Tov. It becomes a general rule that it becomes, the person has to keep upon himself certain Yonim because of a result of that Kabbalah's Azman HaTesis. But it doesn't become a Mitzvah Sasesa Azman Geram. And therefore, as a result of that, the Rebbe continues on in the Hara to explain that the same thing is also the Gabi Yom Kippurim. Do we say that it becomes Mamish la Yom Kippurim? Therefore, that man is also Mechaper like Yom Kippurim, or it's just on a person, and therefore it doesn't have the Gdorim Mamish of Yom Kippurim to say that that Zman of the Teisvis is Mechaper on the person like Yom Kippurim itself. We continue on. In Sifches, now the Rebbe goes, so we started already Olam, Shona. Olam is a din of Metzra, these two Gdorim of what's the title of the Shchenes. The same thing is also in Zman, which is Lagaber Teisvis Shabbos. And over here, the Rebbe goes in Benefesh, and over here goes the rest of the Sikha. We'll try to do as much as we can. The Rebbe starts like this. In Si Mesach Sukkah, Zok the Mishnah. Mishnah says like this. As man gekanzen the Mishmar from Bilga, there was one that the Avedis and Beis Hamikdash was divided by Yisrael ben Chodam, Akain ben Chonin, Yisrael ben Ma'amadam, Levim Shiram Zimram. Everybody was divided in different Mishmaris. There was a Mishmar which is called Bilga, and the Chachamim kanzen this Mishmar as Chodj the Din is, as a Nechnosim Chelkim L'Tzofim. The Mishmar is just to change. When they used to change, the one who used to come in, the new Mishmar would come in, and they would get certain parts in that day that they switched the Mishmaris. They would divide the things that they had in Beis Hamikdash, the Karbonis, and so on and so forth, as we'll soon mention certain things. So the Nechnosim, those who come in to start doing the Aveda, and now they're going to be doing the Aveda, Chelkim, they get their parts in the Karbonis and whatever it is, but Sofi. The Mishmar was hyped on in Aveda, the one who's going to start now, Nemt ir Chelik Bekochim in Tzofein, the Tzofein Iker. Because the Tzofein is the Iker, as we'll soon talk about it a little bit from the Haaretz. And the ones who went out, they divide those who left, they divided in Dorim. That's what the Rebbe brings down in the Order 30, that you should recognize, you to see which are coming in on Tzofin and which are leaving on the Dorim. Is aber, sagt the Mishnah, Bilga la'olam chelekes bedorim. Bilga always got their part in Dorim. Vidi yotzim, even those who came in, they would get on the Dorim. V'tabata kavua v'chaleina sa stuma. Well, soon the Rebbe is going to bring down what's a taich tabata kavua, what's a taich chaleina stuma. It's a machlekes Rashi in the Rambam, and the Rebbe is going to connect it with this whole thing over here with the two tzedodim of what do you call it, of the Geder Hashchems. Before we go further in the Pnim, there is over here a Ha'oreh and a Shula Gillion to the Ha'oreh and a Shula Gillion to the Shula Gillion. We're not going to go through the whole thing because it's pashut a long pilpul, but just bekitzer what's going on. The Rebbe says like this: you could have said another reason why those who come in, they divide bitzafin. Because one of the things they used to divide was the lechem aponim. The lechem aponim was laying on the shulchan, and they would change it, push in the new ones and push out the old ones, and the old ones would be eaten by the kohanim, part by the kohanim who came in, part by the kohanim who went out. The shulchan was standing in the Yazara, was standing at Tzafin. So the reason why you could say, the reason why they divided on the Tzafin is because the shulchan did the Tzafin. So the Rebbe says, but v'yesh leimar, because the truth of the matter is the division was not only in the lechem aponim, there was other things divided also in the karbonis hamizbeach, as the Rebbe is assigned to the Mishnah. And the Mishnah over there actually is talking also, as the Rebbe brings down in the Shulei Agilion for her order 30 star. Now over there is talking about not the lechem aponim, but the shtei halechem. Shtei halechem are done with together with the karbonis, which are mikra on the mizbeach, and the mizbeach was standing bedorim. So b'meile v'balta was standing bedorim. Therefore, that is not the reason why it's brought down that the division was done b'tzafin, but rather to show that these are coming in and those are coming out. The Rebbe is ma'arech over here also that the chalukas of all the things were done in the same time. So therefore, the lechem aponim, the shtei halechem, and the karbonis were done in the same time, and b'meila being they're done at the same time. So even though the karbonis were done in the dorim, so therefore you can't use this as an explanation why it was done b'tzafin, but it done at the same time, because the lechem aponim was done by the shulchan in the tzafin, but the karbonis was done by dorim. Therefore, the chiluk is to show which one are the nechnasim and which are the yotzim. Then the Rebbe goes on another whole thing, the chalukah also in the oires, in the skin. Now, the skin, definitely, the skin of the animals, the oires of the animals. Now, the skin was definitely done, as the Rebbe brings down the Makeres Mishnah, the Rambam, was done after, much later. So it was not done at the same time as the chalukah of the lechem aponim and the karbonates, and therefore the Rebbe concludes over the Shulagil that the possibility is that the oires was not done at the same time as all the other chalukas. The Rebbe is mamshich in the Pnim. In the Gemara bringt the roof zwei timim. The Gemara brings two reasons why the Mishmor of Bilga had this punishment. Aleph to leave Meiser b'mirim bas Bilga she'emira dota v'chulu. The Gemara is married in the Sifra, the famous story that she came into the Chud Beis Hamikdash. She was married to one of the generals. She came into Beis Hamikdash and she took off her slipper and she hit the mizbeach and she was screaming at the mizbeach, "Lukus, Lukus, ad mosai at the machala mamenim shel Yisrael. You're eating up their kabbonis and you're not helping them when they need." And the Rebbe spoke. When the Rebbe spoke to Sicha, the Rebbe was very, very emotional about this part. But Akapanim, being that she did such a thing, she made a dosa. Therefore, they punished this mishmara, that it should be these three things, as we'll soon mention. The second reason is they didn't come on time. They used to come late. Being that they used to come late, therefore they were punished. The Gemara thing is on. The reason that they came late, that's why he punished everybody. Everybody came late. So therefore they were punished. The reason is because of Mirimas Bilgam is Mishambarate Kasinala the day. Because of a daughter, they should punish him as well. The father of the whole Mishmara. Omer Abaye in. Yes. Kidam the inches people say, Shusa diyanuka, Bishuka, when a child speaks in the market, she heard it from the father and the mother. Therefore, if she does bad, in other words, she got it someplace. She got it from a father and mother. Okay, that's only a father and a mother. What does it have to do to the whole mishmara of Bilga? The Rebbe brings down in brackets that being that the Gemara is bringing down the Gabe, the Shakli Vitalia, the reason of Bilga is a mashma. That is the main reason. Now the Rebbe continues up. In Rashi Pirish Ois Firtus Besim Amesechta, Rashi concludes Mekan Omru Oil Rosha Oil Shchenei Umimele Tev Tzadik Tev Shchenei. Why? Because Mida Teva Meruba. Now the Rebbe says, Spalter as from Indian from Tevel Tzadik with Tevel Shchen. Darf Rashi ankommen zu a Klau von Mida Teva Meruba is Mochach, as is nicht Goydes in die Gemara der Reihe von Posik Imru. The Gemara brings a Posik. It says a Posik Imru Tzadik ki Tev ki Prima Leim Yechenu. So in other words, Tevel Tzadik Tevel Shchen says a Posik, but Rashi says Misad Klau of Meruba Mida Teva and Mida Parani is it if oil Rosh oil Shchenei. Idachalakas Kama Vakama Tevel Tzadik Tevel Shchenei. So why does Rashi bring this reason when there's a posik? You must say that Rashi is not Geiris and tak many prints tak is not there. Darf man aber verstehen, sagt der Rebbe, dem Tam davon, what's the reason? Why tak we're not Geiris it? Und in was besteht the chiluk? What's the difference? Whether the Raya is from the posik or it's because of the svara of Meruba Mida Teva and Mida Puranis. So the Rebbe starts explaining in Sif Tes. Wird sein verstandig behektem will understand this. First, we have to explain the Indian what is the two things which we learned before, that what was the punishments for Bilga. Two other punishments was Tabata Kavua v'chaloina stuma. What exactly does this mean? Was mir gewinnt them zwei Perushim? There are two different Perushim. Rashi is mafarish. Rashi explains simple. Tabata Kavua meant as follows. The Tabois was given in Ba'azora, B'moke Beis HaMitbachayim, Ba'yinusunas Ba'avne Ritzba, V'tabaz Psucha Metzad Echad, Ba'hoifchel Amaylo, Machen Sabra B'hem L'Seicha, B'cheze B'hefech Pischel L'Tere Ritzba, V'tabaz Shabiga Kvu, V'en in the Peches Kedei, Shetishtamish B'Shalachet. In order to shech the behemoth, and the behemoth should not go wild, what they did was, there was in the floor of the Azora, there were rings. The rings had one side that was stuck in the ground, the other side was an opening. You were able to open it, put the animal in with the head of the animal, lock it, and then shech. And that kept the animal is steady to be able to shech that properly. That was all mishmaris. The mashmara of Bilga, the ring on the floor was always locked. You couldn't open it and lock it. So therefore she never used that mishmara, never used their own tabas. They had to use somebody else. That's a knas. What's the second punishment? There were time little hole in the hallway. There were little rooms, little lockers. Shesham Gunzim is second Nehem. Over there, the Koyanim would put in the knives, which with those knives that did the avodah, they would put it in there. The sosmu chaloin shel biga. The mashmara bilga, that there her chaloin, her back, so the chaloin was always locked. This says, aside the tabas, aside the chaloin, both of the things in the given l'te'elas hashchita v'keileha, they were both for the purpose of shechting a carbon and the kelim which you needed. The tabas was to the actual shchita. The chalonis was for put into sakinim in it. This is shittas Rashi. The Rambam, my Pirush HaMishnah, says Mefarish. He says a little different, a lot different. Tabata kavua v'chalena stuma. He says like this: Tabas l'chol mishmar. Each mishmar had a tabas. What is this tabas? How you toilin behen habehemis. That's after the shechita. They would hang the animal on that tabas. They would be able to unskin the animal. Kvuis doesn't mean it was always kavua. They would be keveya in the ksalim, and therefore, when did they be keveya? Mashmara, when that certain mishmar would go in to do the aveda, then they would hang up that tabas. To be merames that now that mishmara is working. That's one thing. The Rabbi doesn't bring down the hemshech. Masha'enkin, the bilga, they stuck it into the wall forever. It was not that they would put it in when they came to the avodah. It was stuck into the wall, and therefore it did not show that now they are coming into the avodah. It's one thing. There were also 24 windows, little lockers. Big de kahuna. Over there, they would put the big de kahuna, not like Rashi says the sakina for the shchita, the big de kahuna. Chaloin lechol mishmara. And the same thing is also the chaloin for the mishmara of bilga was sealed, was closed, and they were not able to use it. They had to use somebody else's. Tabas sulib hefshit hakorban und the chaloines libig de kahuna. Says the Rebbe, what's the difference between the two pshatim? Der chilek zwischen the perushim is the Pirush Rashi is the knas from bilga in inyanim was an shaykh oich zu nosh. In other words, the punishment is thing which is directly connected to the women, Varim, shchita d'ksheder bezarim u'benoshim. The Mishnah says clearly in Masechtas Zvachim that it's kosher benoshim as well as the Rebbe is saying in order 39. It's a Mishnah says clearly. Unaichel afil chatchila the sheichtim besakin oroch as Rashi teaches over there. They would stand outside of the Azara and shecht the long knife in order to be able to shecht. So even Azara that's not allowed to go into the Azara. Aisha that's not supposed to go, not allowed to go into the Azara, as we're soon going to mention. She was also able lechatchila to shecht. Only from the Kabbalah Saddam, that's when the mitzvah hakahuna, that's when a kohen has to, but until there, it's Aveda things that also has a shaykhis and can be done by Isha as well. So in other words, what was the punishment? Legabe Shittas Rashi. In Inyanim, Rashi says the punishment is the two things. Legabe the hook on the floor, where you're going to shech, I think which is connected to the Isha. So she was punished, the woman was punished. Same thing is also the chaloina with the hide the sakin to shech, which is a shaykhis to the woman. So that was that the punishment was directed to the woman, as the Rebbe was going to bring out, the one who did Aveda. Bilga, the one who did Aveda. Loi Pirush Rabbi Mobbe. Hat men ihr gekanzelt in azelche, ihr means the Mishmora, in azelche Sachen, was Noshim haben dazu kein shaykhis nicht. The knas wasn't things which had nothing to do with the woman. One is nicht to have shetakabon. It's according to the Rambam. The rings, the tabois, were with to hang up on the wall to be mafshit, the kabonis, and the Rebbe brings down in order for one, even though the din is that hefshit is also kosher bezorim, as the Rebbe brings down the Tzayin, the Gemara and the Rambam and everything else. Nevertheless, as the Rebbe goes on, so the hefshit kabonis, if the tabo is ba'azora, and the azora, women didn't go in, as the Rebbe is Tzayin to the end of order 42, Re'ei Pirush Rashi v'Teisus in Kedushin, the Masav Chiisha, that a woman in the Azara, the woman don't go into the Azara. There's no woman in the Azara. So B'meile, the Rambam's Pirush, that it has to do with the Tabo is hanging to make the Hefshet, even though the actual Hefshet could be done by a Zara as well, and then maybe also by Isha as well. Oh, but Akapanim had to be done in the Azara. Being had to be done in the Azara, the women don't go into the Azara. So one thing is a thing which is not connected to the women. In other words, the way the Rambam learns the Knas has nothing to do to the women. And Avada Nish, the second thing, the windows where they put the Big Corner was an Tzedek Aveda, that's for the purpose of Aveda. And Aveda, Nashim was an Psulas Aveda. Nashim cannot do any Aveda. So this is the machlekes between Rashi and Taisus. Back to what we said before, the Yesod. What's the machlekes in all the three things? So the Rebbe starts explaining. The Yesod for the Plukta Yeshleima. Da as Rashi concept men the Mishmara sleep tam hashchenes. In other words, the one who did Aveda was Bilga. You're punishing the Shochin, the rest of the Mishmara. Aber was the punishment? Nor in azelche Sachen was a Mashachis zum Shochin to the Mrosha Alain, to the Naira, Miriam, bebald as euch sie wollt die kennt on die Sachen. You really, the focus of the punishment is the punishing her. Only a result of that was also the Shachin. But Akapanim, the main thing is her, because being that she could have done that Aveda. Because according to Rashi, it's connected to the Inyan of the Shchita, which is Ksheira Banoshim. So now we're going to punish her that she should not be able to do it. Ubemela is in them Oynish, Ubizoyin Mutkesh, and das kommt to leave the Naira. In other words, even though it's true, everybody, the whole Mishmara was punished, nevertheless, it's Nikir that the Ikir is a thing which is the Naira itself. The Das Rambam Ober. The Rambam says that it has to do to the hefshed, which a woman cannot do, and therefore Bilga could never do it. It has to do to the big dikuna, which a woman cannot do Aveda, therefore Bilga can never do it. So it's a punishment l'chatchila for the rest of the Mishmara, for everybody else. That's a Rambam Ober, is the Knas euch in Yonim was haben zum Roshe die Neide gescheichet nie. It has nothing to do with her. Und das ist verbunden mit dem klolesdicken Geder von Shchenes. This is connected to the whole taich of Shchenes, whether it's an inyan pnimi or it's only an chitzoniistic, a superficial connection. Si Shchenes pelt a shachis pnimi is vishina, it becomes the shachin becomes the thing itself. Bis das wird der Teuchen von Shachin, oder es bleibt nur bescheiches chitzoniis, only a superficial thing. This is the same machlekes as Rashi and the Rambam, as we explained before in the Geder of Bar Metz. Lishitas Rashi is the shayches von Shchenes, not in an Eifach Chetzeni. It only is in a superficial thing. Und das pölt nicht im Haus vom Shochen. Just like we explained before, Legabe the Bar Metzra, that it's only a din on the loikeach, not a din that the Bar Metzra itself gets a part in the field. Gets a tzaz bailus in the field. So b'meila konta Rashi. Let's skip the brackets for a second. Und the far learned Rashi to finish off the thing. The far learned Rashi as euch ir einish bezoyen. This punishment to the bilga, the mishmeres bilga, was kum mitzad the mishchenes to the mitzad mishchenes. In other words, the rest of the mishmara. Is not an Indian Hashchita, was at a Sheiches to the Rosh Alain, Isha. But das kommt nur als a Mesubbe from Rosh. So the main punishment was done to who? To Bilga herself, the woman herself. So she should be punished. As a result of that, the whole Mishmar Mitzad, the fact that she's a Shochin, they also got that punishment. But where was the focus of the punishment? The focus of us is to embarrass her, the bezoyin for her and the einish for her, because the shachin is only a superficial connection. So we have to focus on the actual thing. Enkel shitas Rambam is the teuchen ashchenes macht the sheiches beteuchen. In other words, the whole mishmara who's a shachin, the father, the mother, and the whole mishmara, which is shachin to Bilga, they become part of Bilga Kaviyachal itself, Aber nicht nur dann, als der Eulisch keine meint nicht. No, bin a get, so it's not only a superficial outside connection. You also have to be punished. No, ich bin a get, the riches, what the Shechina spoiled in the most from the Shochan. It has effect on the Shochan. If Bilga was a Rasha, it had a certain pneumistic connection inside. Let's keep the brackets. Ubemele is moving as the oich der oinische bezoyin. So when you're punishing, you're not only going to punish his nish, but then it's Tinyonim was daiten on afamasube fundum Rasha denaira. Not only a superficial connection. Yes, as the oinish is misadadishis from Shochan Gufa. If you are a Shochan to a Rasha, you yourself have that problem. Ubemele, the punishment is not the ikir to the one who did the Aveda, the girl who did the Aveda. The punishment is legabe you yourself, and therefore a kontaramlem punishment was legabe the big kahuna, not legabe the girl. The girl can't do the kahuna. Legabe big kahuna, the omishmara. And the same thing also with the hefshed of the carbon, which is not an inyan which is negaya to the girl. It's a negaya to the whole mishmara itself. Just before we go further, just a few of the ha'ares when the Rebbe brings before the chiluk of the Shittas Rashi and Shittas Rambam, that the Shittas Rashi, the punishment was focused mainly for Milga herself, Miriam as Bilga, not Bilga, Miriam as Bilga herself. And so in Ha'ara 44, the Rebbe brings out an interesting point. According to this, there's three punishments. Tabata kavua, that the tabas was locked, was kavua in the wall or wherever. The chalena was closed, and also the chelek is bedorim. Usually, the ones who came in would get their part in the karbonis and whatever, and was divided. Then it's often they always got bedorim. So the Rebbe says over here a very interesting thing. So in other words, if the main point is, as Rashi, the Rebbe says in the Pnim, according to Rashi, the punishment was focused to the girl herself who did the Aveda. The punishment of that they should divide the karbones, they should divide it, but Dorim, not Batzofin, is the first thing is the Lechem upon him. Lechem upon him was Batzofin, as the Rebbe mentioned before in the Ha'ara, which I mentioned, Bekitz and Nimrod, that it's the Shulchan was Batzofin. And the din is that the women did not eat, were not allowed to eat in Lechem upon him, it was only divided as Zichri Kahuna, to Zcharim. Ebazei, the punishment of the division of the Lechem upon him has nothing to do to the girl itself. And Rashi Shita has to do, to explain only has to do to the girl itself. So the Rebbe says, Be'ikr, you have to say that it doesn't go on the Lechem upon him, as we mentioned already before, but the other things. For example, the Rebbe read before, and it mentions over here now also the oiris of the Kabbanis, which were divided as well. The Mishmaras of Bilga did not get it with Sofin, they got it with Dorim, even though, which was mentioned before, that not necessarily was divided at the same time as the Lechem Aponim and the Kabbanis and the Shtei Lechem. Nevertheless, they got it with Sofin. The same thing is also the Rebbe goes on in the order 45, the Gabe the Shittas Rambam, but this is I'm not going to go into it right now. The Rebbe is Mamshich now in Sif Yud Aleph to finish off this little part of the Sikha. Alpizeh is moving the Chiluk. The Rebbe asked before, what's the difference if you learn it out from a Pasik, as we have in certain Gisoins, or we learn it out from the Svara that if a Memile Peroni is Merubah Midateva Memile Peronis. So the Rebbe says as follows: Alpizeh is moving the Chiluk. Tzimi is Geres Shenemar Imru Tzadik Kitev Al Taraya Tev Tzadik Tev L'Shcheni, whether you learn it out from the Pasik or you learn it out from the Svara. Now the Rebbe explains. The Raya from Pasik Imru Tzadik Kitev Ki Prima Ma'alalei Mechelu is in Pashtus. The Raya is a very Pashtus. Baal the Pasik heeft on Loshen Yochid. The Pasik begins Imru Tzadik Loshen Yochid Kitev. Und is Messiahim Loshen Rabbim, in the conclusion of Pasik, Kipri Ma'alaleim Yechelu. Twice, the word twice in the from plural is Mukach. As euch andere, plural, andere, die Schene vom Tzadik, Jechlu zusammen mit dem Tzadik vom Pri. They eat together, they're exactly one thing with the Pri. Aber Lechaira hat gedacht stehen, Kipri Ma'alala Vichelu. Wie bald sie essen die Peres from Ma'alale hat Tzadik, if they eat from the Tzadik, a result of the Tzadik, so they eat his Peres, not Ma'alalehem. Now, das Gufa meint die Gemara mit der Reihe von Posik. This is the Teichen of the Reihe. This is what the Gemara means. Betzad, the Minyan Ashchenes, is nicht nur was euch sei bekommen dem Subov, dem Schar zu lieben Tzadik. Because of the Ashchenes, not only they get the Schar as a result of the Tzadik, no noch mehr, she's prima aleihem. They themselves get their own reward. Which means, in other words, as vet in zeh ashinui, bis as malale hatzadik vet euch malaleim. They themselves get their own reward. Now, das Gufe is imrule tzadik kiteiv. Me sagt dem tzadik, oder wegen dem tzadik schwacher tzadik. Warum das is prima? Warum das was prima alaleim yechelu? Why do they have their own Meile? Kommt es, lieb die Schene zum Tzadik. Sie haben sich von ihm abgelernt und geworden anders. But Al Kaponim, the Nakud over here is, it becomes a pneumistic change. They become tzaddikim. It's prima aleihem, not prima alei hatzadik. Over Meilism of Nebazei, as Lashitas Rashi Kinal, Lakonta Rashi, we learned before in both the things, in all three things, not three things, the third thing, the second thing of the Tesvis Shabbos Yontav is not mentioned like Rambam and Rashi, as Inyan Ashchenes is nit peil in a Mahus van Shochen Gufa. Konta Rashi doesn't change the person. It's a superficial connection. Nor a Beleja Shaykh is Chetzenis. Hodok in Norton to bring in a Raya for Pasik Ibn Tzadik Kitev, which says, Prima aleihem, their own reward they eat. Of a mele brengt the Raya of Tev Tzadik Tev L'Shchene mitzad Svore for midem Teva Meruba. Oy ben gefind mitzad Aloi Tev as lieb dem Shchenes Chetzenis. If not a good thing. The Shchenes, which is only a Chetzenis connection, has an effect in Rosa as oil Rasha, oil Shcheinei. The culture gain and a middle teva at the Shchenis zum Tzadik, even though it's only a superficial connection, is an Indian from table Tzadik, table Shcheinei, and has an effect that the person who is the Shachin, also gets rewarded for being a Shachin to the Tzadik.